In competitive Pokemon, dominant teams are not supposed to last. Whenever a strategy wins a major tournament, players immediately begin trying to understand why it succeeded. The team gets copied, tested, refined, and eventually targeted. Now, new counters emerge, new archetypes develop, and the metagame moves on. It's a cycle that has existed for as long as Pokemon has. No matter how strong a team appears, the rest of the player base eventually catches up. You might be asking, why do you sound sick? You sound like you just got hit with the sheer cold from Ninetales Alola. And the answer, to be completely transparent, is that I am a little bit sick, but we're gonna make this video work. I'm also gonna be a little bit off script as well. So, looking at the 2015 season, the Pokemon World Championships that season was so unusual. At the biggest tournament of the year, a single team appeared almost from nowhere. The eventual world champion used it too. Most of top 8 was built around it. More than a decade later, screenshots of the final standings still circulate whenever people debate the history of competitive Pokemon. Many viewed it as the strongest team ever assembled, an unbeatable combination of the best Pokemon in the format. However, the reality is far more interesting. What's even crazier is that to many, this team genuinely came out of nowhere. Like, genuinely. It was used predominantly by the Japanese meta, but not respected or even considered by many others. It was not an unstoppable team that dominated an entire season. It wasn't a strategy without weaknesses. Instead, it represented the moment when a player perfectly understood a metagame that everyone else was still trying to solve. To understand why this team became so legendary, we first need to understand the environment that existed before it. I think now is a good point, more than ever, to make sure that you're subscribed. There's a lot of folks who watch our videos who actually forget to subscribe or believe they have, but they actually haven't. Any support matters, especially as I'm personally leaning into making this my full-time job in the future, and this is content that I want to continuously pump out. So the strongest team in 2015 was not the team that I used to top the ladder after Nationals way back when, with Mr. Kipling the Tyranitar, Toad the Amoonguss, a mixed attacker with Landorus Therian with Hidden Power Ice, Stone Edge, and Expert Belt, Burning Legend the Infernape, M. Sankey the Metagross, and Rotom Wash. No, it was chalk. Cresselia, Heatran, Amoonguss, Landorus Therian, and Kangaskhan. The story of this archetype begins long before the 2015 World Championships. In many ways, it begins with the introduction of Mega Evolution itself. Generation 6 fundamentally changed competitive Pokemon. For the first time, teams had access to Mega Evolution. Now, once per battle, their Pokemon were able to take on a brand new form entirely, reaching its ultimate level. New stats, stronger moves, new abilities. The augmentation that Mega Evolution provided to a Pokemon was insane. While dozens of Mega Evolutions were introduced, one quickly separated itself from the rest: Mega Kangaskhan. At first glance, Kangaskhan doesn't really seem particularly special, if I could be honest. It doesn't really look that cool. No offense to my Kangaskhan lovers out there. It doesn't have the flashy appearance of something like Mega Charizard X, Mega Metagross, Mega Mawile, Mega Salamence, the list goes on. It was literally just a Kangaskhan with its baby out of its pouch. Mega Kangaskhan also didn't possess the overwhelming offensive stats of some of its competitors. What made it terrifying, actually, was its ability, Parental. Every time Kangaskhan attacks, it would hit twice, allowing it to attack through focus sashes and boost itself with Power-Up Punch while simultaneously dealing massive amounts of damage. What sounded like a clever gimmick quickly became one of the most powerful abilities ever introduced to competitive Pokemon. Think of it like this: you have a Mega Kangaskhan team with, say, Redirection. Turn 1, you Mega Evolve Kangaskhan and you click Follow Me with your Redirect. Kangaskhan clicks Power-Up Punch. Now, Mega Kangaskhan is not at +1 attack, it's at +2, effectively doubling its attack. As Power-Up Punch's ability is that every time it lands, you gain an attack boost. So now stack that with a nuclear attack such as Double Edge, a 120 base power normal move, which also has the same type attack bonus, and suddenly you're killing everything. That thing was insane. Throughout 2014, Mega Kangaskhan established itself as one of the format's defining threats. Team builders constantly ask themselves the same question: how do I beat Mega Kangaskhan? Defensive cores were designed to withstand its attacks, while offensive teams search for ways to overwhelm it before it could take control of the battle. Garchomp emerged as one of the best Pokemon simply due to its ability, Rough Skin. Upon contact, this meant that Kangaskhan would receive recoil damage every time it touches a Pokemon with Rough Skin or Rocky Helmet. So what Garchomp teams would do is that they would use Garchomp and slap a Rocky Helmet on it, allowing Kangaskhan to lose 25% of its health every time it touched a Garchomp. Intimidate also was everywhere too. You had niche choices like Scrafty, but you also had standalone picks like Salamence. Mega Mawile also emerged as a top Mega, simply due to Intimidate and its Steel typing, walling Mega Kangaskhan. But despite all of that, Kangaskhan was everywhere. It was winning everything. If you didn't respect Mega Kangaskhan, it was going to sweep you. Yet, despite all the dominance it had during the season, Kangaskhan failed to win the World Championships that year. Ironically, one of the worst Pokemon in the game, Pachirisu, won instead. What a weird format. The result revealed an important truth about competitive Pokemon. The strongest Pokemon are not always the best choice for a tournament. Once a strategy becomes popular enough, every player begins preparing for it. Success creates a target, and eventually that target becomes difficult to carry. As the 2015 season approached, many players believed Kangaskhan's reign was beginning to end. Then Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire changed everything. They buffed my favorite Pokemon in existence, Pikachu. Now, I'm sorry, they didn't buff Pikachu. Instead, they gave us the national dex. Pokemon from every generation were now able to be caught if you had Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire, Pokemon X, and Pokemon Y. This was the first time we had seen something like this since 2013, Pokemon Black 2 and White 2. However, expanding the Pokedex introduced new threats that challenged Kangaskhan's position at the top of the metagame. Mega Salamence with Intimidate and a very high base speed became one of the most dangerous offensive Pokemon ever released. Metagross, with its new Mega evolution, came as a very offensive Steel type attacker. Mega Gardevoir emerged as a devastating Trick Room threat capable of overwhelming teams with Hyper Voice that weren't prepared for it. Suddenly, Kangaskhan was no longer the undisputed queen. It could be outrun by Salamence. It struggled against Metagross. Trick Room teams built around Gardevoir could flip favorable matchups on their head. The metagame had become far more complicated than it was a year earlier. Many players began looking elsewhere, but one region continued searching for ways to make Kangaskhan work: Japan. Going back to the misconception that Chalk appeared out of nowhere, in reality, every member of the core was already recognized as one of the strongest Pokemon in the format. Players really weren't discovering hidden gems. Landorus was already considered to be one of the most valuable Pokemon ever introduced to VGC thanks to Intimidate, Earthquake, Rock Slide. When there's a Rock Slide, there's a way. So Scarf Landorus was actually a staple in many players' teams. Amoonguss had spent years proving itself as one of the format's premier support Pokemon through Spore, Rage Powder, and Regenerator. Heatran provided an extraordinary combination of offensive pressure and defensive utility. Its Fire Steel typing granted an enormous amount of resistances, allowing it to remain on the field for extended periods of times. A very common set back then was Shuka Berry, so you wouldn't immediately go down to Landorus Earthquakes. Players also like to use leftovers with Substitute, taking advantage of defensive turns and utilizing Heatran's fantastic bulk to stay on the field for as long as possible. Cresselia brought some of the most stable speed control and support options ever seen in VGC, offering access to Trick Room, Icy Wind, Thunder Wave, and has exceptional bulk. Individually, each Pokemon was already elite. The true brilliance of Chalk was how perfectly those pieces fit together. Heatran hated ground types, but both Landorus and Cresselia were immune to it. Cresselia also offered access to Ice Beam, and the two most common ground type users were Garchomp and Landorus, both who were 4 times weak to Ice. Our Landorus despised Ice-type attacks, yet Heatran resists them 4 times over. Amoonguss could redirect attacks away from vulnerable teammates, while simultaneously threatening Sleep with Spore. Kangaskhan provided immediate offensive pressure through Fake Out and Parental Bond, creating opportunities for the rest of the team to establish favorable positions. The result of this combination of Pokemon were that you had a team that felt complete regardless of the matchup in front of it, and this is only with 5 Pokemon. And yet, despite all of the synergy, Chalk was still not dominating major tournaments. The final piece of the puzzle had not yet been discovered. Enter the World Championships 2015. This is where Chalk broke through. Shoma Honami took these known entities and understood why and how they should be built. At a time when many Kangaskhan were investing heavily in speed, Shoma focused on both. Rather trying to win speed ties and speed wars, he invested and focused on the Trick Room mode with Cresselia, Amoonguss, and Heatran. This was a much slower variant of Chalk, allowing it to work very well with Trick Room, but also Thundurus Incarnate. At the time, Thunder Wave was a 100% accurate attack. It paralyzes Pokemon that are not electric types. Back then, with Prankster, you could actually use status moves on dark type Pokemon as well. Now imagine Thunder Wave. It halves your speed by 50%, and every turn you have a 25% chance in which you cannot attack. Combine this with the fact that the natural core of Chalk struggled against bulky water type Pokemon. There was really no way to hit it, unless you did maybe Giga Drain on Amoonguss. But even so, Amoonguss weren't investing in their special attack or offensive prowess at all. Now, let's combine Thundurus and Thunder Wave with Rock Slide. Rock Slide from Choice Scarf Landorus. Every time Rock Slide hits one of your Pokemon, back then you had a 1 in 3 chance of not being able to move. Combine that with Thunder Wave's 25% chance of not being able to move. Paraflinch was now a new strategy that this team had incorporated. The fact that such a consistent team was able to provide so much positive luck variance in your favor it honestly wasn't fair. Back to Shoma's team though, he used slower Kangaskhan and slower Assault Vest Landorus, opting out of the Choice Scarf variants. This allowed Landorus to survive Hidden Power Ices from Thundurus and other Pokemon, as well as Charizard-wise overheats and heat waves, making it the ultimate pivot Pokemon with Intimidate and U-turn. What made Chalk so special was that it didn't win with overwhelming offense. It won with slow positioning, using the best Pokemon in the game. And the longer the games went on, the more chances you had to win with RNG due to Rock Slide flinches, Spore, Sleep Turns, and Thunder Wave. However, if Chalk was truly perfect, it would have dominated everything. It didn't. Rain teams remained threatening. Aegislash was very difficult to break. Aegislash and Rain was very hard to break, and Mega Gengar was a little bit scary but very niche. With a team that focuses on positioning and switching out, Mega Gengar Shadow Tag inherently makes the strategy weaker. Players continue developing answers to the archetype, just as they always do whenever a dominant strategy emerges. Players remember the world's top 8 graphic. They remember seeing the same core repeated again and again and again and again and again. What they often forget is that the 2015 season itself was far more diverse than any single image suggests. Sand was rampant, rain was rampant, Trick Room was rampant. Chalk did not spend an entire year crushing every tournament in existence. For one weekend in 2015, a player brought the perfect team for the perfect metagame. So many players, especially from the North American scene, utilized teams that were actually weak to Thundurus and Landorus. For example, Aaron Zhang. His answer to Chalk was using Swampert at World. Swampert, Life with Blaziken, Ferrothorn, Gothitelle, Mega Salamence, and Sylvie. Such a cool team, but when your only resistance to Thunderwave is Swampert, it's not gonna lead to a fun time. This team actually struggled a lot against just the very common Landorus Rock Slide plus Thundurus Thunderwave, as long as you remove the Swampert. Gothitelle could be taunted, which would stop Trick Room. Ferrothorn would be taunted, which would stop Leech Seed. Landorus intimidates Salamence and hits it super effectively with Rock Slide. Thundurus paralyzes Salamence. Thundurus also paralyzes Blaziken. There really was no perfect answer to Thundurus Incarnate in general in that metagame. And you might consider Pokemon like Landorus to be the perfect counter due to being immune to Thunderwave and Thunderbolt, but Thundurus just carried Hidden Power Ice to one-shot it super effectively. And that's what made Chalk so special. Every choice made sense, every piece fit together, every weakness was accounted for as well as possible. And that team was immortalized in competitive VGC history. Anyway, that's our breakdown on Chalk. If you'd like to see more of our content, we have a lot of videos that also happen to talk about Pokemon. Alright guys, have a good one. I'll see you around.
もし聞こえてる？